love yerba mate, baby. After my last video, I got a few questions, and so I wanted to get a video together to answer a few of them, or at least to give you guys a little bit of a guide in this process. What I want to talk about today is actually looking for and buying a house, or more specifically, looking for and buying a rural piece of property to either invest in or to turn into a homestead. When I first started this process years and years ago, it was very, very difficult to get straight answers on what the process is going to look like, finances, what it's actually going to take, timelines. A lot of people want to sugarcoat it, and it's not as hard as you think, but it's also not as easy as you think it's going to be. I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that I struggled with and just some basic questions. Obviously, the biggest thing right now is financing. I think most people are going to struggle to find homes in urban areas that they can actually afford anymore. If you are my age or younger, you are going to struggle to find homes in urban city centers. Rural is going to be a better option for multiple reasons. I know some people might not necessarily want to live in a rural situation, but let me just give you a little bit of advice. The United States government offers lower or subsidized interest rate loans on rural qualified locations, USDA and FHA loans. So these loans are designed to help people buy homes in areas that are underpopulated across the United States. It is not based on your state necessarily. It is a federal program, even though your state is involved in it, but it can be anywhere that it qualifies for these loans. You can't make a certain amount of money. The money guidelines are actually pretty high. And if you're moving to a rural location and your job is actually paying you less, but you can afford a home in that rural location, it helps. I'm not saying everyone's going to be able to qualify for a USDA or FHA loan. That's the very first thing you're going to have to do if you're interested in buying some rural property or buying property in general, is figuring out what you have for financing, whether that's a savings, a gift, or like most of us, we're gonna have to finance this ourselves with little to no down payment and also monthly payments that are reasonable. So the FHA and the USDA loans, they have not only down payment assistance programs, they have lower interest rates, they're easier to qualify for. You do have to meet certain regulations, but honestly, I think a lot of people could. They're not outrageous. Look into rural locations. Make sure your rural location is rural enough. How many times can I say that? And look into FHA and USDA loans. Look for banks and lending associations that offer those types of products. I think they're going to be one of the only ways that young people are going to be able to build value in the future because of the accessibility on payments. A cliche you're going to hear, I've heard my entire life, is house poor. You don't want to get into a situation where the house payment you have to make is so outrageous that it forces you to work more than necessary. You want to work as little as possible to pay for your house. But if your house payment is so high that it forces you to have to be at the very upper end of what you can possibly earn, then we get into a situation where you are house poor. Most of us cannot afford to pay a $2,400 a month house payment. That's just the way it is. In order to be affording to actually pay that, you have to have a household income of close to $100,000, whether that's between you and a spouse or that's you yourself. That's still a lot of money. Even though people will say it's not a lot of money these days, $100,000 is quite a bit of money. That is my first suggestion. Take a look at USDA or take a look at FHA. You don't have to be pre-approved to put in offers on homes. If your realtor is asking you to be pre-approved just to even put in offers on homes, find another realtor. But you do not have to be pre-approved to put offers on homes and look for homes. I suggest that you at least have an idea that you're going to be approved so you're not wasting people's times, but you do not have to be pre-approved. Just FYI. Once you have an idea, and you can go online and find USDA calculators or FHA calculators for housing prices. I have a leaf in my tea. And you can get an idea of how much house you can afford. That is going to be your next process. The good news about rural locations, and I'm going to be speaking specifically about Colorado because that's where I live, but you can apply this to where you live and housing prices where you are. My state of Colorado, the average house price is right around $500,000. It may be a little more right now, but it's pretty close to $500,000. In rural locations away from ski resorts, which happen to be inflationary where I live, you can get houses for $100,000 to $200,000 less than that. With that being said, those homes generally are going to be in a little bit worse shape than if they were in large city locations. But you have two advantages. You're probably not gonna have to pay an HOA, which I'm not going to be paying, and you shouldn't either. You also are going to, like I said, qualify for different loan styles. Once you have an idea of what you're gonna be able to afford, again, it should hopefully be cheaper than your housing median price, which puts you at a little bit of an advantage. Right now, specifically, I'm making this video in spring of 2026, is a really, really good time to be a home buyer. It's actually a really bad time to be a home seller. And a lot of people would say, well, the interest rates are high. We're at war with Iran. I get it. When there's pressure on the housing market like this, where inflation is high, we're kind of looking at almost like a stagflationary. People aren't looking to buy houses in the normal trends that they're buying. So when you're buying outside of the normal trends, you're going to be able to get better deals. Obviously, if you're watching this right now and it's 2028, I don't know what the economy looks like then, you can look for similar trends. They happen all the time, over and over again. Now understood how much we're gonna buy, kind of where we're gonna buy, and around the time when we wanna buy. My next biggest tip or suggestion would be, if you can, don't rely solely on online house hunting. In cities, I think online house hunting like Zillow and Redfin and Realtor, all those are probably way more advantageous and actually have a lot more efficacy than they do in rural situations, especially in rural situations. Go to the houses. Look at them, walk through them, spend a little time there. For instance, in the location I'm at, in Colorado, we have lots of homes that are very old, that were built in the 1900s, the 1910s, the 1920s, the 1930s. And so people will retrofit or renovate these homes. Maybe they didn't do the best job, or a lot of times you'll see a home that has had nothing done to it for 70 years. No renovations, no retrofitting. Well kept, but again, things are all from a time gone by. So go to the homes. Homes in rural locations oftentimes aren't held to codes and specifications as tightly as places in urban areas. So you'll go and you'll find some really fun DIY projects that were done by the previous owners that you may have to fix in order to get a loan on it, or you may have to have them fixed before they can sell it. Or in certain places, you can just maybe get some price reduction off of that, which is in my case exactly what happened to me. There were some repairs and things done by the previous owners that were not up to code and failed inspection, and so I was actually able to go back and ask for that money off, but it all depends on what your bank and what your location allows. Again, rural locations are going to be more lenient, and lending on rural properties is going to be more lenient from your bank or your lending institution. What next? Well, if you're looking for a rural property and you're interested in homesteading or potentially a flipping property, you want to look for a little bit of land with that property. And I do mean a little bit. I think some people, especially if it's their very first homestead or first rural property, they overestimate their ability to work land, or they at least overestimate their ability to steward the land properly and make it profitable or make it livable. If this is your very first time to be on anything besides a city lot or a big backyard or something like that, or even if you lived on a nice piece of property that was inside city limits, buy 1 to 5 acres maximum. A half acre is a generally nice little size piece of land for most people. You can do a lot on that, especially if there's no covenants and HOAs. 1 to 5 acres is good. 5 acres for a city slicker coming onto their first rural property is gonna seem huge. Some people get mistakes where they're buying 40, 50, 100 acre plots at once. It is an incredibly daunting amount of work. I promise you, it's too much. Look for 1 to 5 acres. That is gonna be a really good plot of land size. It's gonna feel like you're in the country, and it's also gonna be something that in the future, it can be sold if you're gonna sell it for an investment property for multiple different reasons. It could be a yard for a construction company. It could be a small hobby farm. It could be a small hobby garden. It could be a nursery. It could be all sorts of things. 1 to 5 acres is a really, really nice size. And like I said, for your homestead, 1 to 5 acres is a really, really nice size. You could have all sorts of animals, chickens, goats, a cow. You could have some sheep. You could have ducks. You could really do a lot, and it won't be insurmountable, and it won't feel daunting, and you won't have pieces of your property that feel untouched. If you're buying property that has large areas of forest on it, that may be a little bit more appealing. So let's say you have 5 developed acres and you have 105 undeveloped forest acres. Sure, there's nothing wrong with that. You let those 105 basically stay wild and you tend to your 5. What you don't want to get into is 105 acres of workable land that you have to irrigate, take care of, mow, hay, feed, whatever it is. There's a lot of work involved with acreage. Talking about water rights. Here in the West, the Western United States, and I can only speak about the Western United States, specifically the Rocky Mountains, we have things called water rights, and those water rights determine the water usage that comes off the mountains. So the snow collects on the mountains, it melts in the spring, it comes down irrigation ditches that have been dug for centuries. Those irrigation ditches flow into pipes and canals and eventually go out into the Pacific Ocean. Along the way, they're used by farmers and folks as almost a free, they're usually associated with the real estate you buy, so they're not free, but they are a free usage of the water. What that means is you can irrigate your crops with water that is not coming directly out of your pocket as a billed metered fee. And having either water rights to a well, to irrigation, to a spring, to a lake, to a pond, something where you have water on your property that is not billed at a direct meter usage is huge. It should be something that's almost a make or break, but not necessarily. I can tell you from living on a place that was cistern only water, having to drive down into town and get 6,000 to 9,000 gallons of water almost weekly, not super fun. Keep that in mind. It may sound, oh, that's not that big of a deal to just go get some water in the water truck or to have water delivered, but it really is. You want water on the property in a non-metered way. You can have city water or tapped water from the municipality, that's fine, but you really do want some access to wild water rights. I would almost make it a make or break, especially if this is going to be your homestead that you plan to live in for an extended period of time. If you're buying in a rural location, get it inspected. A, get it inspected. B, expect the inspection to fail. Inspectors in rural locations are going to be a little bit more lenient than they are going to be in urban locations, but that doesn't mean that you should not get it inspected, and you should also expect the inspection to fail. That's just the kind of the nature of the beast. Not saying it's going to happen, but I would say it's actually more common that it would fail the first time than not. And what are you going to do with that inspection objection? There's a couple things that you can do depending on the state where you live and depending on kind of the situation you're in. Lean on your realtor, and if you're doing this yourself, you better know the location and you kind of better understand the market very well. You can either, if it's not a big deal, ask for money off the asking price. If it is a big deal, you can ask the seller to fix it. If they can't fix it by whether they don't want to or they don't have the money or the time, then you can pay to have it fixed. And then, there are obviously a combination or a strategy based around all of those. Depending on the severity of it, the easiest is just to ask a little bit off the selling price. Most of the time, sellers are gonna be, okay, yeah. If it's between $2,000 and $10,000, the seller is not going to really be nitpicky usually, but they can be nitpicky, so just keep that in mind. Always have an inspection, because there could be something that is way outside of your scope that you did not know, and it's a complete deal breaker. Or there's something that is really big that you can bring to the seller's attention and maybe get a giant discount. Really, most places in the United States are not going to have, a bank is not going to approve the sale without an inspection, just to make sure something crazy didn't happen. But even if you're financing it 100% with cash out of your own pocket, get an inspection no matter what. The next step is going to be valuation, and there's two types of valuations. One you want to be low and one you want to be high. And you don't want one to be low and you don't want one to be high. The tax assessment and the actual valuation of the home, the market value, the title company that you are going to use to transfer the title from the seller to the buyer, they're going to be the easiest people to deal with, or they should be at least. They're going to send out somebody to do a tax assessment. They're going to look at previous year's bill levies, and they're going to look at the new bill levies and what they cost. They're going to walk around the home, make sure nothing crazy has changed, and basically just get an idea of what A, you are going to be paying for taxes, so you want that number to be low. And B, also to give you a general idea of the market valuation, but it's almost always going to be lower than the true market valuation, almost always, unless you live in a really particular place. After that, which you want to be low, you don't want to be very high, you're going to get the mortgage company or whoever is actually giving you a loan. And if you don't have a loan, you don't have to do this. If you're paying cash, you can skip this part. You're going to get a valuation or a market value assessment. They're going to come out and they're going to tell you or give you an idea of what, and this is often called the appraisal. They're going to appraise your home and say, okay, this is what we think it would actually get on the fair market. You want that number to be as high as possible, and you don't want it to be low, because you can think of that as the cap that the bank will lend to. If you have a house, let's say that's $400,000, and your offer is $400,000 rather, and the valuation comes in at $390,000, or the appraisal comes in at $390,000, well, the bank's saying, hey, we're only going to give you $390,000, That extra $10,000 you're either going to have to come up with, or you're going to have to ask the seller to give you a lower price. So if you go to the seller and say, hey, this is what we are doing, the seller can say, nope, I want $400,000. You would have to come up with $10,000 in cash to make up that gap. Keep that in mind. Just because somebody is asking to sell a home for a certain amount and you agreed to buy it for that certain amount, you may not actually be able to pay that amount. It is important to understand the difference between tax valuation, tax assessment, and market value evaluation or an appraisal. You want your tax assessment to be as low as possible and your appraisal to be as high as possible. It's generally not the case, but that's where you want to be. Final steps of purchasing the home, the land, and putting it into our possession. Most rural properties are going to have a secondary inspection. I mean, this is most, depending on where you're at, and that is a septic tank. With a septic tank, you're going to have a mechanical way of filtering out sewage into a safe diffusement of it. And I'm not going to explain how a septic tank works. You can Google that. But that tank, through certain steps and processes, that water is filtered out and leached out into the world in a natural and safe way. But it has to be pumped, drained, and inspected before you can take possession of a home. Always have the septic tank inspected and pumped. It is not super expensive. It should be somewhere between $250 and $1,200, depending on where you live, for the full shebang. And it's such a peace of mind because you don't want the SHIT to hit the fan, literally. So we want to make sure that that is all taken care of, but you are almost always in a rural situation. If you're getting an FHA or USDA loan, you probably have a septic tank. So keep that in mind. You are going to have that done, and it's generally an extra cost. Usually the seller pays for it. Sometimes it's split. Almost never the buyer pays completely for it, but in your location, it may be like that. Let me get a drink of tea. I'm topping off. If you're coming from a place, especially a place that is a really competitive real estate market, you may be used to incredibly high-end finishes inside the house. I think houses built in the 40s and 50s and 60s were actually really well built. The trim and the finishes weren't up to the expectations that we have now. So if you're coming from an urban location, keep in mind that your expectations need to be a little bit lowered. When I say this, it should be a little rough, but not rough. If you're looking at a place and you're like, how do people live here? This looks like it should be on an episode of Hoarders. Run. Or you might want to hire a professional. All the things I'm going to be suggesting, this is as DIY as it gets. I just have a realtor. That is it. That is all you need. And you need a good realtor that you like, that you trust. Anything else, you can basically do on your own with most projects, and that's what we're going to be going through with this renovation project. I just want you guys to understand that if it is a real nightmare, either run or you're going to need somebody who is a local professional. I say that with the utmost importance. Do not hire somebody who is out of towner to come work on your rural location. A, it's rude to the people who live out there. B, the people out there are going to have the best deals on all of the local lumber yards and contractors. Hire a local contractor, talk to people, talk to your neighbors, get suggestions from a realtor, get suggestions from the mortgage company, get suggestions from the title company. Everyone's going to have a suggestion, or a brother or a cousin or an uncle who does something that you might need. So if you're hiring contractors in a rural location, hire them there, buy local. It'll go a long way, I promise you. Do not bring in some outside contractor from a city 3 or 4 hours away. You will make everyone mad, and you probably actually won't save yourself that much money. To wrap it all up in a nice little bow, if you're looking to buy a home right now, a rural location may be the very best option for you in terms of pricing and financing, especially if you're looking for a USDA or an FHA loan. You want to make sure that you are looking for a place that is an appropriate size for you. 1 to 5 acres is plenty for most people buying their first rural property, especially if that's for your own homestead. No HOA, no covenants are a must. Water rights should be very, very, very high on that list as well. The house can be so-so, but the land and the water rights really need to be what you're looking for. Always get an inspection. Even if you're buying cash, it doesn't matter. You may do nothing with the inspection. You may find something that could really have bitten you right in the keister. Make sure you understand the difference between your tax assessment and your market value appraisal. 2 different numbers, and you want one to be low and one to be high. In almost all rural situations, you're gonna have a septic tank. You have to get it pumped and inspected. Do not fear the septic tank. You're gonna grow to love it. Finally, change your expectations, or at least temper them. Rural locations aren't always going to be the most beautiful on the inside right away, but with a little bit of elbow grease and some DIY know-how, you'll be able to easily upgrade the inside of the house to anything you want. I'm excited for you guys to join along with me on this journey as we go basically step by step, buying the house, acquiring land, seeing it in its semi-raw state, working on it, and then seeing the transformation. All of this is to glorify God. We're going to be working through these processes with a mindset and our hearts focused on Christ. Everything we do is going to be from a Christian-centered world. I hope to help one another understand the life of a devout Christian in a world where we have to go out, we have to make money, we have to provide for our family, we have to do a job, but we can all be done with a centered focus of a godly life. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. See you guys soon.